Excellencies, dear colleagues, good afternoon to who is with us at the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions meetings of the Conference of the Parties here in Geneva. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who is with us online or is now watching the video of the event. This event is live on WebEx, but is also streamed on various platforms. We have the pleasure to welcome you today for a side event convened by the Basel Action Network, known as BAN, and Break Free from Plastic, with the support of the Geneva Environment Network. This event, we look at the first full year of implementation of the new rules on plastic waste trade that were adopted by the Basel Convention here in Geneva back in 2019. Jim Puckett, the Executive Director and founder of the Basel Action Network, will be chairing this session. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you everyone for joining here in Geneva and around the world. I think we have an interesting program for you. We've got speakers from 7 countries, and some of them joining us from far away, at least Yuyun is. Today we're going to first look at an overview of where we're at with plastic waste trade. We have this amazing agreement in 2019. We want to do a report card now that we've had a full year of implementation. We're going to have reports from target countries: India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Nigeria. Then we're going to talk about some of the more positive developments and wrap it up with conclusions. And I hope you save a lot of questions for the end. We'll take questions online and in the room. So the plastic amendments, the first year report card. We're all very aware of the achievement of the Basel Convention. Last COP, COP14, 2019, we took action to stop what you're seeing on the screen today here, dumping and burning of plastics from the indiscriminate export and very partial recycling that takes place in developing countries around the world. The Conference of Parties met. We, by consensus, everyone agreed that this was an urgent action that had to be taken. It was a cause for much celebration. Here the NGOs are getting support in the last days for this set of amendments. And here is the press release that the NGOs proudly put out at that achievement a few years back. And I'm going to quote David Azalea here of Center for International Environmental Law, where he said, "Today's decision demonstrates that countries are finally catching up with the urgency and magnitude of the plastic pollution issue and shows what ambitious international leadership really looks like." So we were all very proud, and we had no idea of what was to come. And I have to say today that we are soundly disappointed in what has happened in the first year, and we will talk about why. But first, let's real quickly remind ourselves of what we agreed to. These was the set of amendments, probably the longest entry ever conceived in the history of Basel for waste entries into the annexes. But what they basically did was they said, we're going to make 3 different types of plastic. We're going to cover every plastic. No plastic will fall outside of the convention in terms of being discussed. The first one is hazardous plastic, A3020. The next one is non-hazardous plastic, B3011. And what is B3011? It is going to be going to our 3 destinations, which means mechanical recycling, not incineration. It has to be environmentally sound management. And you have to have either a single polymer, cured resin, or condensation product. So separated. There's one exception. There's a mixture of PET, PE, and PP that's allowed. But this notion that to fall outside the control procedures, you need to be sorted and cleaned is very strong. Cleaned is not contaminated. We'll get into that in a little bit. And the final aspect of what can be exempted is to be in the control of the convention. If it's a halogenated polymer, then you're definitely controlled. So it needs to be a non-halogenated polymer, with the exception of the fluorinated polymers listed in the text. So the most important entry was the entry that says, okay, if you're not non-hazardous and you're not hazardous, we're still going to cover. And this is the new Annex 2 listing, Y48. This is the most important revolutionary development. This is where most of the plastics right now that are being traded and being collected and produced, generated around the world, they are Y48 plastics. And these are considered waste for special consideration. So that one is the one we're really talking about today. What's happening with that, and are we really controlling it? So what is the effect of these amendments? This control of Y48 is normally going to be done by prior informed consent. So you have to notify from the exporting state and get the consent of the importing state. You also have to have assurance of environmentally sound management. And failure to do those things equates to illegal traffic under the convention and is a criminal act. But there are two instances where a ban is in effect rather than prior informed consent. First instance is the European Union has agreed a long time ago when they implemented the ban amendment for hazardous waste that they were going to include the Annex 2 waste. And this is a ban from OECD to non-OECD countries, basically. So Y48 listed plastics are illegal to export to non-OECD countries from the EU. There's a ban. Then we have the case of the US, which is a very large non-party. And in the convention, there's a ban between parties and non-parties. So unless you have a special Article 11 agreement that is equivalent to the Basel Convention, that's also a form of a ban. So what that means is people, when the US exports this Y48 plastic, the importing countries that are Basel parties cannot accept it from the non-party. The exception to that is with the trade with Canada, because the US and Canada have signed an agreement, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So in this report card, we have three categories of concern that we want to talk about today. The first is about unilateral refusals to implement the agreements. Second is flows of concern that we've figured out from analyzing Comtrade data. And finally, failure to enforce the new rules, which we're mostly learning about anecdotally. So looking at these, give you a preview here of the alarming findings. And the first one has to do with these Article 11 agreements that were signed and stitched together real quickly in certain arenas to avoid the amendments. First was the European Union. They early on declared that their waste shipment regulation was a valid Article 11 agreement. Therefore, they could ignore the PIC procedure for internal EU trade. We find this to be rather stunning and outrageous. Another one was the US and Canada declared a valid, what they considered a valid Article 11 arrangement to ignore the plastic waste amendments also. So under the convention, parties are not allowed to reserve. They're not allowed to say, we're not going to follow the convention. That's clearly stated in the convention. There's one exception where you can join with non-parties or create your own side agreements. Those are called Article 11 agreements. But it stipulates very clearly they must be no less environmentally sound, or in other words, provide an equivalent level of control. So what the European Union has done and the US and Canada has done, obviously they're not abiding by the new controls on Y48. So there's no way in the world you could say that's an equivalent level of control. There's no big police force that's going to jump on those countries, but clearly it's invalid and really threatens the integrity of the convention. So that's an alarming finding from the outset. Crunching the Comtrade data, what we did was we looked for HS code 3915, which is plastic scrap. We did a lot of analysis. You can find a lot of this data on our website. But some of the alarming findings there, I'll give you a preview of these, is that Japan is identified now as the world champion of plastic waste trade, by far dealing the most, mostly developing countries, as we'll see. Malaysia, unfortunately, is the world champion plastic waste dumping ground. They're receiving the most from countries exporting. The US exports to Latin America are increasing, in particular to Mexico, and this is really concerning. The Netherlands seems to be a major conduit for Asian exports. And we don't think they're being generated in the Netherlands. We think the Netherlands is a transit point and needs greater scrutiny. And Germany's exports to Turkey are on the rise. So those are the ones we're going to highlight today. I'm going to show you a little more detail there. First, this is 2020 is the blue, 2021 is the orange. You can see that generally, except for the Netherlands, Belgium, and France, the trade is declining between those 2 years. But the OECD in a recent report said we can't deduce that that is from the ban amendment, the Basel plastic amendments. It has probably far more to do with the pandemic and the supply chain shunting the shipping and the lineups for the shipping. Shipping slowed down tremendously. So we're not sure why it's generally coming down, but overall globally, the trade has decreased by 14% between the 2 years. But you can see Netherlands, Belgium, and France, it's increased. But what's important to us is the trade that involves externalizing costs, exploiting weaker economies. And to get to that issue, we have this chart here, which identifies the 7 countries that are most prominent in exporting to non-OECD, to Mexico and Turkey. Mexico and Turkey are also weaker economies. They just happen to be in the OECD. These 7 countries, we give a shortcut. We call them the E7. And again, you can see Japan is number 1, US, followed by Netherlands, Germany, UK, Belgium, and Australia. So those are the countries we would really like to see curtail their waste trade activities. Japan, most of that export, very unfortunately, is going to Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, developing countries in their region, which have a high propensity to have environmentally unsound management in those locations. These are the top 10 receiving countries from the E7, the top 7 exporters. Again, you can see Malaysia, followed by Turkey, Vietnam, Indonesia, Taiwan, Mexico, and so on. This is the alarming thing we have found with respect to Latin America. The exports to Latin America are increasing dramatically, and that dark blue means it comes from the US. So it's the US that's driving this increase for sure. And here you can see the whole year, month by month, of US exports to Latin America. That goldish color there is Mexico, but the whole region is getting more and more waste from the United States and non-party. Netherlands, you can see I've given you 2 charts, one showing waste exports to Indonesia. The red line is the Netherlands compared to other European countries. Really off the charts, cannot be explained except that Rotterdam probably is being used as a transit port for waste from all of Europe. These should be recorded as transit and not export, and the Dutch authorities should act on this at once. Some of the reasons we believe it's coming from Europe is we will look at other charts like this one on UK plastic waste exports to the Netherlands. You can see in 2021, it skyrocketed. At the same time, the rates went up on exports to Asia from the Netherlands. The waste that UK used to send to Turkey seems to be going to Netherlands and then to Asia. Germany also a great concern because they have started to lower their exports to Turkey, but now it's increasing again. So the question you're probably thinking is, okay, but are these exports are they legal or are they illegal? We're going to dive into this a little bit. We believe that most of this trade is illegal. And the reasons we believe that are summarized here. The ability to reduce contamination of collected plastic waste is very low, very difficult to reach the levels that Basel is talking about. The ability to sort to single polymers is very limited. We also have proven exports of PVC that we have data to show that those are clearly going to be Y48 and illegal from the EU and with trade with the US, because there it's banned. We also have very little evidence of diligent enforcement. Really, there has been very few stories of seizures, of returns, of compliance, of people filling out notifications. We have a whole gang of e-waste recyclers that we certify in the United States. And when I ask them, are you having to fill out any forms to export your plastics? They say no. And the industry is corroborating that. And we've also just recently put an operation in force called Can Opener, which I'll talk to you about a bit. So getting to that issue of contamination, of how clean is this stuff, is it going to meet the standard of the Basel Convention's new entries? The new entry doesn't give a number of how free from contamination it needs to be. It just says almost free from contamination. So that means that the parties need to determine that number themselves. The language is very strong, almost free from a legal standpoint. So countries are coming up with those numbers, and you can see some of them here. Very significantly, the European Union has said 2%. So they can have 2% of non-plastic or non-target plastic, but anything higher than that is going to be considered Y48 controlled plastic. You can see other numbers here. China's 0. They're not accepting any solid waste. Indonesia is also 2%, Hong Kong 0.5%, etc. So those are very low numbers. So you think, well, what does that really mean? The reality checks are as follows. We have municipal waste being collected all over North America and in Europe. These are bales of mixed plastics. And even if they weren't mixed plastics, they would very likely be contaminated. Why do we know that? Well, even the sorting that they've done with the PET and some of the more sophisticated MRFs in the US, in California, this is from a bale rate study in California, the other, which is the contamination, was 14.1%. These are some of the more sophisticated MRFs we have in the US. Reality check number 2 is agricultural waste, another big source of waste, but you can see from this report by the commission that 30 to 40% of mulch films, 40% of it is contaminated. So way above the 2% that the EU is stipulating. And again, with electronic waste, a lot of appliances and electronics are part of our waste stream with plastics. They're highly mixed. Really, nobody in that business is geared up to sort these. So they are going to be mixed. And this is the kind of mix that's in a typical computer, many different types of plastics. So nobody's geared up to really separate those and then to have them clean to a level of 2% or so. So most of this material is Y48. And of course, I mentioned PVC being an organohalogen is definitely Y48. So it should be controlled. When we look at PVC from the 2 regions of the world where we have bans instead of pick, I'm talking about the US on the left and the EU on the right. This is for 2021, HS code 39153. So this is a rare case where we can actually identify the plastic beyond just scrap. We know that this is PVC 39153. And the blue bands there represent what we can absolutely say is illegal trade, because it's a halogen and it's in a part of the world where we have a ban rather than pick that should be applying. So all those represent illegal trade. It's a total of 21 million kilograms plus, and that represents 20,000 plus 40-foot intermodal containers that happened last year illegally. So where is the implementation? Where is the enforcement? This is the low-hanging fruit. We can find this data. Government should easily find this data. So what we did, having gotten access to not only the Comtrade data, but subscription data from different services that we pay money for to get bill of lading extracts, we got these subscriptions and we were actually able to get them in a timely way so that we could warn countries of exports from the US and Canada while those shipments are on the water. So we will warn countries that it's coming your way. We'd like you to search these. They're likely to be contraband. You need to check it out. We chose 5 countries: India, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And we were very disappointed with the results of the response. Malaysia and Thailand did respond. They said they're working on it. We will hopefully get a full report from them. Vietnam and Indonesia did not respond. And India, only after we called the press and told the press what was going on, did we get a response. And here you see the letter that we sent to India, an example of it, giving the exact container numbers, the vessel, the port of discharge, and the estimated time of arrival. Beautiful intelligence for any enforcement officer. I mean, we gave it to them on a silver platter, exactly the containers they should search and see if they're truly contraband. They did nothing until we contacted the Times of India, and there was a story generated, and suddenly the ministry confirmed about receiving these alerts from the two organizations, and the necessary action was being taken. We highly doubt that any action would have been taken without the Times of India. We still don't know whether this will result in government action. So there seems to be a government sitting on their hands about actually implementing what they all agreed. So next, I would like to turn to the experiences on the ground in the various countries and information a little more specific to different parts of the world. And I will start by handing over to Muli Bingatesan, consultant with BAN. Here you go, Muli.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate Jim and Geneva Environment Network for this opportunity. Considering time, straight away I will dive into the data. As Jim mentioned that India is one of the top 10 countries that is receiving plastics waste from all over the world. You see here between 2000 and 2015, every single day, India is receiving 80 containers of plastics waste that is completely unchecked. So 80 shipping containers, only India, but all over the world per day between 2000 to 2015, every single day, 4,000 to 5,000 shipping containers carrying plastics waste from different countries reach to different destinations in the world. Moving on, here you see the current status. Between 2001 and 2010, and between 2011 and 15 and 2016, the average 172,000 metric tons per year. And in 2018, China filed for letter of intent that from 2018, they will stop importing plastics into their country. So what has that resulted in? Immediately, the plastics waste exporters across the world were looking for new destination, and India is one of them. And that is why you see immediately they filed the letter in 2017, July. In 2018, India saw 33% increase in year-over-year plastics waste received. And suddenly, some NGOs and civil societies in India called up the government, they have to stop this. And India acted on it. In March 2019, India said that they will stop importing any plastics waste from anywhere in the world. So then you saw immediate decrease. Though it was announced in March 2019, the industry went to the government and negotiated, give us 6 more months of time before we find a new source. So that was pushed another 6 to 7 months before they start implementing the ban. Whatever the numbers that Jim showed, that India is receiving even after this ban in the place, meaning that it is not enforced. India have a blanket ban on importing plastics waste, but still India is still receiving. There is no enforcement. So that's why in 2019 you see a decline, and of course 2020 is COVID times, and we started seeing increase again from 172,000 metric tons per year. It dropped to 1/3, which is 50,000+ metric tons per year. This is the current status. From 80 shipping containers per day, it has dropped to 23 containers per day as of now we speak. So between 2016 and 2021, so this is the status. Around 705 million kgs of plastics waste has been received in India, and the majority is coming from US and the second country is Germany, and the rest from Europe. And you won't be surprised to what Jim have showed, the top 5 countries that Jim showed, it is already here. And as Jim mentioned that nobody would believe that Belgium or Netherlands is generating that kind of a waste to be shipped to India. I believe, as Jim mentioned, that Rotterdam is being used as a transit point to move the plastics waste from one country to another country. And we did see UAE. I don't believe UAE is also generating that much of a waste, but still some operators legally or illegally sitting in UAE and shipping and moving containers to different countries. And Canada also. None of these countries, US or Canada or any country, has a capacity to recycle their own waste generated. So that is why they keep moving on to moving the goalpost. If China bans, then they go to India, and if India bans, they go to Malaysia or Vietnam. And the foreign lobbying in India. So as Jim mentioned, that from 2021 January, the Basel Plastic Amendment was implemented. Within 27 days, India changed the law. It again permitted importing PMMA and polyethylene under different conditions. But who knows who is measuring if the conditions are met, the countries that are receiving these containers and plastics waste from all over the world. And very interestingly, this news was published only in the Industry Association's plastics news magazine. Nobody has reported this news. And I clearly don't know why they allowed PMMA alone to be imported in India. I don't know the rationale why the government made this decision. I don't know if there wasn't any public consultation on this particular change. And the domestic lobbying. In March 2022, just few months ago from today, India again opened up importing PET container bottles to be processed in India, even if it is imported as a waste in India. And the reason for this is a bunch of industry processors went to the government and said that we ran out of plastics waste in India, so please allow us to import so that we can process and fulfill the needs of the capacity in India. And anybody in the right mind would doubt India have capacity is fulfilled within the domestic collection. I don't know why they allowed, and I don't know if the government checked the data or the claim from the industry. And a little bit on modus operandi, like how do they move the containers? It is a well-known information. They misdeclare generally, and they have a very good network of brokers. For one example, if you see in the bottom, the buyer in the US market and the seller in the US market and the reseller in India all can be the same guy registered as a different company in different countries, and that is how he is moving the containers. And also, industry, though they lobby for allowing the plastic waste to be exported to different countries, they don't have a list of certified or registered exporters. They don't want to get into the regulations, so they also don't have. And again, as Jim mentioned, none of the government is ready or willing, or they don't have a resource to enforce the new amendments. And they use freight forwarding companies to hide behind them and then ship their containers across the world. And classic examples, the example on the left, what you see here is Jim mentioned as few containers is being directed to Indonesia, and Indonesia shipped rerouted. They want US to take back these containers. And Jim found out that those containers which were supposed to be rerouted to US, they found it in India. So that is one example in 2019. And the Canadian channels have found out the plastics has been smuggled into India in the name of paper waste. Okay, you ban the plastic waste to be imported in India. Okay, we will ship it through misdeclaring it as paper, and that is also very well documented. This is two examples you can find in the public domain. And here are a few questions for the government and for the industry. So does the government generates the data as the US EPA on the generation of plastics waste collection and recycling? Does the government has the certified recyclers or registered recyclers of India? Or if not government, does the plastics industries in India, do they have the plastics waste generation, collection and recycling in India? Or do they have a list of registered recyclers under their association? The answer is very clear, they don't have, but they still lobby for importing plastics waste from all over the world. And the future, and as I have said, there is a constant increase of plastics waste even after 2021. As first quarter of 2022, already 11 million kgs of plastics has been imported for this year, and the major countries are North America, Europe, and Japan, as Japan has been top exporter as of now. And as I mentioned earlier, no country in the world has their own capacity to recycle the plastics waste they have generated. And in the name of trade, please, if any industry representatives or governments are sitting here, in the name of trade, please don't legitimize criminality in the name of trade. And we cannot celebrate, we are doing something great in the name of circular economy by just simply shipping plastic waste from Western industrialized nations to East. And when a country, India is completely relied on waste pickers for the domestic waste recycling, and you're expecting the entire world to believe that they have a capacity to recycle imported waste. That is unacceptable. And again, dignity of life rather than density of plastics. And again, don't rely on pseudoscience and keep exporting plastics waste to different countries, which you don't have a capacity to trace or track. Yeah, this is a study from the Center for Science and Environment in Delhi. Nowhere in the world, even with the most sophisticated optical sorters, you have a capacity to sort a plastics waste more than 18 categories as of now. But just mere using the manual labor, the Indian waste pickers can segregate 55 different types of plastics packaging and product waste. But we cannot claim credit for this because you have a dignity of life. You cannot consider waste picking as a dignified life. I don't think they are enjoying what they're doing. Though India doesn't have a nationwide EPR, still this is happening only because of economic reasons. They benefit out of doing this. That is why they are doing. Finally, tolerating plastics waste only enables guiltless and limitless consumption. And it enables people looking away from the real problem. And this enables only poorly designing packaging and product. And it believes shipping somewhere the plastic waste is somewhere it is getting recycled, it is not acceptable. And it is, as I mentioned, dignity of life. It perpetually oppresses and suppresses the voiceless. Thank you, Jim. That's my last slide. Yeah.
Thank you, Muli. Next, we're going to have Modus from Malaysia. Go for it, Max.
Good evening, everyone. I work for Sahabat Alam Malaysia, Friends of the Earth Malaysia, and we have been tracking in terms of the plastic waste trade in Malaysia. So in terms of the global plastic waste trade, as Jim had already mentioned, we find that Japan is the largest exporter of waste to Malaysia. And if you can see from the chart here, in 2018, you can see that it's so higher in terms of the export. This is because Malaysia was the top dumping ground. And as Jim had mentioned, it is still the top dumping ground for plastic waste of the world. So in 2018, when China closed its borders to many types of waste, including plastic waste, Malaysia became the top destination for global plastic waste. And why is that so? Because waste has been moving around. We were not really knew about it until China closed its doors, and everyone, it was very chaotic. And what we found was communities in Malaysia, especially in the rural areas, they started complaining about having problems of breathing difficulties, and they started investigating why is it happening. And they found out that some of these plastic waste recyclers, they were illegal, and they had started off their operations, and not all plastic waste can be recycled. So the residual waste were dumped or burned, yeah, so in the open dump. So this was an issue. Okay, so Malaysia has, so based on that, and because of the community complaints, and NGOs have also been voicing out our concerns, Malaysia started having controls in terms of plastic waste which can enter into our country. And so in terms of the importation of plastic waste, which is, as Jim mentioned, HS3915, the importer requires an approved permit from the National Solid Waste Management Department. Yeah, and this is also controlled under the Customs Order 2017. So whatever, whenever the waste comes into Malaysia, if from the port, the importer must show their papers, then only it will be released from the port to go to the recyclers. Okay, in terms of, so the border enforcers are the Customs Department. In terms of the Department of Environment, because they are the focal point for the Basel Convention, they have also come up with some of the restrictions. And this all includes, next, Harvey. Okay, in terms of importation of plastic waste B3011 or Y48, and Jim had also mentioned that it is 0% contamination. It means that whatever, so it should, whatever contamination is there, it should not be, it should be still plastics and no hazardous substances in the consignment. So frankly, it is 0%, and a little bit of dust is allowed, but we can see that whatever consignments that they had opened up, there was more dust. And A3210 is prohibited. Yeah, next. So, as I mentioned, the Customs Department will have to check on what is coming in. But can you see, it's like thousands of containers that come through our ports every day. Is it possible to check every container? No, unless you have a scanner. But what happens if the scanner is not working? Yeah, and it's not cheap, yeah, to maintain a scanner or repair a scanner. So sometimes it just like smugglers can just bring it in, yeah. And also in terms of the inspection, also you would have to know the, you know, the capacity of the customs officer to determine what kind of plastics is in, whether it's mixed, yeah. So these are all the questions that we need to ask in terms of the enforcement of the plastic waste amendments and the rules. Thanks, please. And this is a slide and pictures from National Solid Waste Management Department. One of the officers is here also from Malaysia. And what they found is when they opened up the containers, in reality, some of the containers of the plastic waste is contaminated. Some of it is contaminated with electronic waste or scheduled waste, hazardous waste. And when it's only when you open up, if the customs does not open up to inspect, or the inspectorate body does not open up, you would not know what's in there. So if they don't open, they don't check, this waste will be going to the recyclers, and whatever it cannot be recycled will be dumped. And where is it dumped? It is not going to an environmentally sound management dump sites or wherever. It is dumped in a rural area where it is polluting the environment. Next, please. And this is also an issue of abandoned containers. Recently, the Department of Environment in Penang, where I come from, they inspected 14 containers of plastic waste imports. This was from Belgium, Great Britain, New Zealand, USA. The importer was declared bankrupt, so they had to open up, and the containers were abandoned since 2019. The ports in Malaysia also, they have been complaining because there are so many abandoned containers there. And when they opened up, they found that there was one container had hazardous waste in it, yeah, although it was declared as plastic waste consignment. And next, please. And what we are also increasingly finding is imported paper waste. There's a lot of paper waste is being imported to Malaysia, and mostly it is also from Europe. And even you can see in the papers that they allow a little bit of throwaways or contamination. So it is like, in terms of plastic waste, it's 0% contamination. In terms of paper waste, there is some allowance for contamination. And what do they do with the contaminated plastic waste? This is either burnt in land, burnt in open dump sites, or buried in open dump sites, or burnt in situ incinerators in the plants itself. And we also find that there is also tire scraps. We have in the Basel Convention right now, they are also discussing about waste from tires. It is coming in as tire-derived fuels or refuse-derived fuels, and this is also causing problems. Yeah, this is an instance where a tire scrap from Australia was up in flames for 4 days, and even if you smell plastics burning, it's horrible. And just imagine tires burning, yeah? And this is also affecting our communities. Next, please. And what we have also been increasingly seeing is plastic waste from plastic content in e-waste, which is being shredded and also dumped on the lamps, and also the legacy waste. These were pictures recently we had, we've gone on a field trip, and we found that the plastics waste, which was dumped in 2018, has not been cleared yet. Yeah, because who's going to pay for the clearing costs, and where is it going to end up? So the government just decided to just leave it there, and this is what's happening. It's turned into microplastics, and it is going to get into the environment, in our bodies. So it is still a huge problem. Next, please. So one good news that I would like to share is one of the states in Malaysia has decided to prohibit import of recycled plastic waste for recovery or final disposal. We think that, in terms of the definition, it could be plastic waste for recycling. And also, they are not going to consider any more business licenses for plastic recycling factories. And whichever factory which has a business permit, they would also be reviewing their permit. So in terms of that, we have also been asking for a meeting with the Selangor government to find out what exactly they mean about all this. Yeah, and we have also written to state governments which has factories with approved permits to import plastic waste to follow the Selangor government, because this is a really good policy. Yeah, we do not want to be next year. Please do not report that Malaysia is the top dumping ground. Yeah, we don't want to be a champion. Yeah, in terms of plastic waste dumping ground. Okay, thank you. Next, please.
Next, we're going to have Yun streamed in from somewhere she's hiding, speaking about Indonesia. Yun, can you take it away?
Yes, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Diana and colleagues from the Geneva Environmental Network. So from Indonesia, I can share some updates. Slides, please. Yeah, yeah, you can skip that part. It's just an intro. Okay, I would like to start with this slide. That this is actually the main updates. So as of the 1st of January, the government of Indonesia asked exporters to be registered at the Indonesian embassies. Not registered, but I mean is that validating their paperwork and registered as trade partners of Indonesian companies. And then at the same time also the Indonesian government announced that importers only allowed to import 50% of their installed capacity. This is actually learning from Malaysia. In Malaysia, importers can import about 75% of their installed capacity because lack of supplies from domestic sources. So in Indonesia, companies who want to import only allowed to import 50% of their capacity. And then in April, the Ministry of Trade issued a regulation concerning import and export of goods, especially highlighting the hazardous waste, because now we have a new umbrella policy. So far, we haven't seen any improvement in enforcement of this new regulation because it needs to take into effect in 1 year. And then in June, we've seen scanning in the media that so many associations, the associations of containers complaining about the long process of the containers releases. So they want to do it quickly, but I think it's because the Indonesian customs also started to implement the Basel Amendment. They check all containers thoroughly. And then in July, exporters started to be aware that Indonesia's contaminant 2% has been taking place, although this regulation is already issued in 2020. And for that, we organized focus group discussions with the relevant ministers and also with the associations of plastic industry and also the associations of paper industry, because in one of the regulations, the Indonesian government also planned to develop the roadmap for circular economy of the paper and plastic industry. So from that workshop, we also received information that currently there are about 355 documents of registered exporters already verified in 41 Indonesian embassies and consulates. And this is coming from 28 exporting countries. The highest one was from the US. So although they are not party to Basel, but 62 companies in the US already registered. And then in Japan, 53 companies. From Australia, 38 companies, from the UK, 24 companies, and from Singapore, 48 companies. And this is also strengthened by government regulations. However, that data cannot be obtained because it's confidential. So this is the steps how the customs control the shipments and so on. I think this is the same like in other countries as well. And like in Malaysia, in Indonesia also, there are 8 ports equipped with the scanner, but we are not sure how long or how often they turn on the machine because it's a rather expensive operation. Yeah, so this is the port of entry of plastic waste imported by Indonesian companies. We can see that the charts in blue, the blue color, is the port of entry of Batu Ampar, which is located in Batam. So now more and more shipments coming through Batam. Batam Island is the entry point for the Batam Special Economic Zone, meaning that materials imported to that area have to be exported 100%. So I guess many recyclers are now working in Batam, although there are some activities also still monitored in some other ports. And if we break it down, this is from the Indonesian Statistics data. The volume of PE being imported and mixed waste also still exists, although it's not as high as in 2018. And also Indonesia exported waste, plastic waste to other countries. Countries of origin of the imported plastic waste, the highest one came from Europe and Australia as well. So from Europe, I think it was the Netherlands who was the top rank exporter. And as you know that in the past, 2019-2020, Indonesia also intercepted several illegal shipments. And as of December 2021, these are the figures of the confiscated containers, especially plastic waste, but some of them are mainly confiscated because of contaminated with hazardous waste. And from Batu Ampar or Batam, it was confiscated about or inspected about 532, and then the Ministry of Environment will verify whether the shipment is clean or not, and then they will give a green light whether it has to be exported or can be taken out by the importers. Please note that the words used by the Indonesian officials are exportation. It's not return to senders. It's not repatriation. So it's re-exportation. And the highlight here is PT NHI, which is the New Harvestindo International, located near Jakarta, that imported a lot of problematic containers. So these are all the list confiscated from one company. But if you go next, please. Yeah, so by 2020, about 2,200 containers confiscated, and then some of them are already released or considered as clean, but some, like for 1,078, considered problematic because the paperwork and illegality of the shipment. It's the same method like mentioned earlier by Molly, that the mislabeling, misdeclaration are common use in this shipment, illegal shipment. And so if you see re-exported meaning send back to the traders, but could be differently. Next, please. So in total, 1,078 containers has not been processed in August. So we tried to get the information, but it was the previous slides was the information from the Ministry of Environment. So it puzzled us because actually there are still more that have not been processed. Yeah, so these are the companies that are considered doing illegal shipments. However, we never seen any administrative sanctions or strong penalties for them in the media. But some of them has been shut down because their paperwork is not complete, but it was not announced. So interesting. And some of them are paper industry, paper company, paper mills. So we went to the field a couple of times because we monitored this particular company since 2019. And when we check on the field, I took the picture from someone's terrace from the house next door. I still see a lot of piles of waste from 2019 to 2020. And the picture on the right is a nail factory which melt a lot of metals. And when we were there, it was a black smoke coming from that factory, and I could smell very strongly plastic being burned. So because these factories are next to each other, my guess is that some of the waste from Harvestindo has been transferred to the next door factory. And so from the exportation that recorded, it said that 80 containers returned to Australia or exported to Australia. The easiest for me to check is to the United Kingdom. And then I asked the UK Environmental Agency, and they said they never received any notification from Indonesia for exportation or repatriation. So I don't think they are returning to senders or they've been repatriated, but it could be the mode, as explained before by Molly, exported to other countries. Next. Yeah, so recently in the UK, Biffa, as one of the exporters of paper bales and plastics, exported to Indonesia and then confiscated or intercepted by the UK Environmental Agency, and then they fined 1.5 million pounds sterling, which is the highest fine ever issued by the court in the UK. And their partner in Indonesia is a paper mill that we monitored also since 2019. This company imported a lot of contaminants, and then in the past they distributed the unwanted plastic waste to the communities for burning, for lime and so on. But last month when we went to the field, it was compiled and kept inside the property, although the communities also allowed to pick the valuable plastics from that landfill. So more and more we've seen paper companies have a private plastic landfills. Yeah, so this picture came from one of the largest paper mill in Indonesia. Their landfill is growing bigger and bigger. So I would like to conclude by mentioning this, that all the supply chains of shipments have also to pressure the surveyor companies to be accountable with their bill of ladings, because the shipments can be, as Magas said, can be only found when they open it at a destination. So it will be good if we can ask for the accountability of bill of lading, so they will be more honest in writing what's inside. And also traders and brokers also need to be registered. So it's not only the companies who exported it to be registered and known. And I would love to see the list of these traders publicly appeared somewhere, so we will know who's doing naughty things. And then the roadmap for the economy for paper and plastic industry need to be developed by every country, so they will know how much is actually can be imported and how much can be sourced domestically. And then stricter law enforcement and penalties, we would like to see it more and more. And the coordination between two ministers, Minister of Environment and Minister of Industry, need to be strengthened so they do not conflict of each other. And then contaminants, as Magas already also mentioned, the legacy of contaminants have to be managed in an environmentally sound manner. So I hope we can get into the question and answer later. Thank you. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Yuyun. Next, we are going to go to our Thai representative, who we call ARM. Thank you, ARM.
So yeah, hello everyone. So I'm going to be presenting about the plastic waste import situation in Thailand. I'm from Earth, Thailand. Our organization works mainly with industrial pollution, but for the past 5 years, we have been seeing more and more problems of waste import, of course, because of China's announcement of a ban on waste import in 2017, leading to an increase to Southeast Asia, Thailand included. So that has led to an emergence of dirty recycling companies in many provinces in our country. And what we mean by dirty recycling companies are companies that do not follow environmental regulations, have no concerns for local communities, and as you can see in the photos, put copper wires and plastic waste right outside where the rain could just wash over them and flow into rice fields. The imports of waste have also lowered the domestic price of plastic, really affecting the livelihood of waste pickers, waste collectors, who are integral to the circular economy in Thailand, and thus damaging that plan to build our own circular economy. And it is with this reason that the civil society has been campaigning against waste imports since 2018, Earth included. We work with the Waste Collector Association to call for a ban on waste imports into Thailand. And that has led to a national ban on e-waste in 2019, which is a big victory, and also a plan to phase out plastic waste imports by 2020, but we'll get back to that. There's an asterisk there. However, after that, we are still seeing imports of waste into Thailand in many forms, and the first forms that we see are illegal imports. This is a picture from the National Bureau from the Thai government from 2021, a company in the United States exported municipal waste, which is a waste that is banned in Thailand for imports, and declared it as unsorted paper. So luckily, the Pollution Control Department was able to open the containers and check them. And we're still tracking whether these wastes are being repatriated. Next up, we have e-waste, particularly HSA 548. So we go back to the national ban on e-waste in 2019. There were exemptions, and HSA 548 is one of those exemptions. And in 2021, we already see the imports of 43 million kilograms of e-waste, HSA 548. And you see the usual suspects in terms of the exporters there: United States, Japan, China. That exports has continued into 2022. So we researched the data for January to March in 2022, and we found 11 million kilograms still being imported into Thailand. This time we have Australia and Italy as well being the top exporters. So just to show you where these e-waste end up in Thailand, there are many dirty recycling companies in Thailand, but one that we particularly feel is indicative of the problem is in Kok Saat Kangsin. Technically, it's not a factory because it's more of a village that sort and dismantles e-waste containing a lot of plastic, and they burn them as well. So these people, because they lost their livelihood because of economic problems, they take up this livelihood instead, and they burn e-waste. They live around e-waste with no protection. They raise chickens that pick around e-waste in finding food and then eat their eggs. So yeah, this is the end of the chain when it comes to waste exports. This is where the e-waste ends. So another way in which plastic waste are getting into Thailand is HS 3915, which everyone else has talked extensively about. The international definition for HS 3915 is waste, pairings, and scraps and semi-manufacturers. But there is a bit of a complication when it comes to Thailand law. HS 3915 is subdivided into two categories, mainly waste or scraps, and that distinction is determined by level of contamination, how sorted they are. And of course, this is an important way in which industries are able to say that we're not importing waste, we're importing plastic scraps. That has led to a debate in terms of whether or not Thailand is still importing plastic waste or not. So initially, as I said before, we had plans to phase out the imports of HS 3915, whether scraps or waste, by 2020, but industries lobbies come in and then push for an extension of that deadline to 2025. Now, to mention, Earth is also part of the subcommittee pushing for a ban, but we have seen industrial influences in these lobbying, and the deadline is pushed. So just to see a bit the data on the imports of HS 3915 to Thailand, in 2021 we see 158 million kilograms, with Japan as the top importers, the champion, Japan, United States, China, and then the same top dog coming back in 2022, January to March. Just the first 3 months, we already see 44 million kilograms coming in, and that's concerning. Now, our country participated in the ban campaign, the can opening campaign, and Pollution Control Department responded pretty well in our opinion, and we commend them for that, but we have to ask if they have the capacity to check every HS 3915 shipment in the port. This is 158 million kilograms per year, and they don't have a lot of people in their agency. So we see HS 3915 as a loophole still, where waste could come in, where illegal shipments could still come in. So our Earth has long advocated that HS 3915 needs to be phased out in terms of imports completely. Now, you might think that after 2025, with the deadline of the 3915 ban coming in, that there would be no more HS 3915 coming into Thailand, but that's not true, because there was a new Custom Department notification last year saying that any factories that is included inside the free zone would be exempted from the ban for HS 3915. So even if we implemented that ban, factories could still establish themselves in the free zone and still import waste. And this free zone is controlled by the Director General of the Customs Department. He has the power to decide whether a factory is beneficial to the country or not. And that we think is very a big loophole that is coming up. And we're already seeing a lot of factories moving into these free zones. And this is just one example from last year. This is the Tatong community. They come from Chonburi province in the eastern region of Thailand. And anyone who's been to Thailand, you will know that eastern region is where the big port is there. And that's where plastic is coming in. And a Chinese company came into this agricultural community and says that we're going to establish a free zone with 14 factories in it. And the Department of Industrial Work hasn't given, last year they haven't given a permit for the factory, but they got the permit for the free zone before the factory. So they haven't passed environmental regulation, but they got a permit to establish free zone. And after they got the permit, they then got the factory permit, which we see as a bit of a loophole for this. The community has protested against this, saying that it's not transparent, and they have been sued by the company. So we want to leave with this because we believe that the Thai government needs to ratify the Basel ban amendment as soon as possible to prevent any further issues. And we believe that proper and rigorous implementation of the plastic waste amendment by all governments, including Thailand, including any exporters government, will help to improve the plastic waste import situation and help these communities. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Leslie from an entirely different continent, Africa and Nigeria.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I will just give a little picture about the violations happening in Africa. But I mean, I'm going to speak more about the Nigerian case as far as plastic waste trade is concerned. Okay, so just a little background about Nigeria. I mean, for us to really understand where we stand, it's the largest, it's a huge economy and the largest in Africa. In fact, it's being referred to as the giant of Africa with a huge population of 20 million. In terms of waste consumption, Nigeria is an oil and gas country, and as such, I mean, there's huge production of plastics. In fact, we used to say there's a plastic tsunami already happening on ground. And in addition to that, there's a huge importation going on. Nigeria imports more than 20 million tons of plastics between 1996 and 2017. And at this rate, the plastic imports are expected to reach 40 million tons by 2020. Another national data survey estimated that 1.5 million tons of plastic are generated every year. In Africa, of course, we rank the second highest import and use of plastic behind Egypt. And just less than 10% of this plastic waste generated is recycled. That figure you see there just tends to explain more deeper the mismanaged, how Nigeria is among the 10 countries producing the largest amount of mismanaged plastics. In terms of where we stand, with regards to the obligations, I mean, the conventions, we have signed the Basel Convention since 1989. Bamako Convention, as you know, which is African own convention, we have signed but not ratified. Sorry, in terms of Basel Convention, we've signed and ratified. That's what I mean. Then Basel Action, Basel Plan Amendment, we have signed and ratified, as well as the plastics amendment. But importantly, like I said, we signed the Bamako Convention over 20 years ago, and up to now we haven't ratified. So continuously we're like an observer status, and you know what Nigeria is in the African region. It's not on the ground that some things are happening. It's just that it's not sufficient in terms of regulatory framework. In 2020, the Federal Ministry of Environment put in place the national policy, very comprehensive national policy document on plastic waste management. Its goal was probably, is to look at plastic waste management through a life cycle kind of approach. But however, we looked at the document, and we noticed that there's a gap in terms of it doesn't probably properly put in place or mechanism for plastic waste trade. There are other policies documents here and there, but no specific regulations specifically addressed plastic waste management. Of course, yes, there's an EPR process in place, but it's still at the infancy stage, not well fully, not being fully implemented. Now, this figure you see is taken from BAN action work in 2021, and I'm just building on what the presentation made by Jim, and you see he presented one related to this, and in this case I'm just giving the African situation. From what you see there, the same OECD countries, Japan, US, Netherlands, Germany, and all that, as far as in terms of the total volume of waste being exported into Africa, that's what you see here. South Africa is about the highest, not necessarily plastics, not necessarily plastic. You have Ghana, Kenya, Angola, all receiving huge amount of waste from,
No, this is all plastic.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is all plastic. Then I want to share a particular situation. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with this. The illegal traffic of waste into Africa, the scandal of the Italian waste exported to Tunisia in 2020, where about 282 containers were exported into Tunisia by two. It was a huge scandal, and what happened about this eventually was that one of our sister NGO, who is a member of IPEN, who actually followed this process of this is the kind of waste that you found in those 282 containers. So it was a serious scandal that happened in Tunisia, and the result of that was the Tunisian minister was sacked. Because it was a violation of Article 9 of Basel Convention as it relates to illegal trade. They were fought and back on what needs to be done, and eventually, of course, they finally recognized that yes, they had faulted, and there was a shipment of about 212 containers back. But you agree with me that 212 is a far cry from 282 containers. So it means that some are still left in Tunisia. Now coming to Nigeria in terms of illegal traffic of waste into Africa, and particularly plastic waste from USA to Nigeria, BAN has been tracking plastic waste based on the presentation we just heard, export from US, from a Basel non-party to a party. PVC, Y48, which Jim spoke very, very detailed about, was found to be exported to Nigeria without PIC control. From the next figure you will see, in Africa, Nigeria followed by Ghana top the list of countries that continue to receive this illegal PVC, and from the US. From this figure, you can see the OECD, non-OECD country, that's the PVC waste exported from the US. The red one is the non-OECD country, while the blue is the OECD country, and you can see the extent of export that's coming from the US, just in line with what Jim presented. This is a bit very important for us to say. This is our latest information with regards to the Nigerian situation, where there's evidence of shipment of PVC waste to Nigeria from the US. The The ones not in white colors are the specific shipment to Nigeria, while the white side are the ones are shipped to Ghana. And we have data also for other African countries. Here you can see the, I'm sorry, I can't see very well from here, but here you can see evidence of the company who is responsible, from what countries the shipment is coming from, the quantity of PVC waste that is being shipped, in line with the HS code Thailand just mentioned. It comes as waste, but of course, that HS code is a little bit confusing. So all the details are there, and it's obvious that huge volumes of plastic waste is being dumped in many African countries, just like the case of Nigeria. Well, for us, we have continued, we've been in advocacy as far as this is concerned since 2017, trying to engage all the policymakers on the need to transpose the Basel Convention amendments in Nigeria. We regularly give them data, do audits, and recently we developed a policy document that identified the gaps in the policy process, as well as that will enable them to domesticate and transpose the convention. Of course, the quick points I would like to make: there are barriers to policy and regulation to reduce plastic waste. On the ground, they talk about financial, because yes, you do not, most of the time, you do not get the government making proper budgets that will help to address this kind of issues. There's also lack of policy enforcement, which is also taken from the same problem of lack of budgeting. There's inadequate stakeholders engagement and the public awareness campaign. On the ground, there's also the challenge of the lack of cost-effective alternatives and recycling facilities. Then generally, governance is weak. There's no political will to really address. I mean, it's one thing to ratify a convention. It's another thing to domesticate. There's not much political will in this direction. And that's why you see what the experience of continuous dumping of PVC, as well as other waste is continuing in the country. I would just want to conclude that it is vital that all Basel parties, because before you can have, there must have to be an exporter to get a receiver. So in this case, of course, to have a US who is a non-party exporting is an illegal trading that's ongoing. So it's vital that all Basel parties stay like Nigeria properly and diligently implement and enforce their obligations under the Basel Convention. Whether we like it or not, if we want to efficiently be able to transpose or be able to, looking at the whole details, what we had in Asia and also in Africa, for us to be able to implement the convention properly and domesticate properly, then there should be sustained financial resources to help to build capacity. In most cases, the custom officers, the regulatory bodies do not even have the capacity to identify the Y48 differently from what should be allowed or what should not be allowed. So that's one huge challenge that's in the system. I'll just round up by saying, against the background, we really support the petition, to stop waste colonialism in Africa. We shouldn't, because of lack of knowledge, lack of capacity, continuously make Africa a dumping ground. And we want to make sure that we want to make sure that we raise the advocacy around this issue of waste colonialism strongly. At this point, I want to say thank you for
Thank you, Leslie. To make a statement on behalf of all of Africa.
Thank you so much.
Come on up. Do it, okay, do it from there, sure.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jim. Colleagues, in light of the waste cases that my dear colleague Leslie has presented, it is quite clear that Africa is not yet free from colonialism. It continues to manifest itself in the form of waste trade that allows for the importation of toxic and non-recyclable waste into the African continent, eroding away at the very foundations of our liberty and environmental justice. In commemoration of Africa Day 2022, 69 individuals and 136 organizations have called on the leaders of Africa to stop waste colonialism in the continent. The practice of exporting waste from higher income countries to lower income countries who are ill-equipped to handle this waste is simply an unjust form of environmental racism. It places the burden of plastic and toxic waste on the environment, communities, and these countries' informal waste sector, especially in the global south. Plastic waste is exported under the so-called guise of plastic recycling, yet in reality, only a scant 9% of plastic that has ever been produced since the 1950s has been recycled. Italy, Germany, the USA, and Greece all are culprits for exporting waste to many African countries, leaving Africa, its future generations, to shoulder the burden of environmental, social, and economic damage, which is an unjust action. This is a lack of respect for our sovereignty of Africa. It infringes on the laws that the land has put in place to serve to protect its people. All countries need to take responsibility for how they produce, manage, and dispose of their waste. During this face-to-face segment of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention in Geneva, Switzerland, we today as civil society are calling for an end to the exportation of all plastic waste to the continent of Africa and for the reduction of plastic production globally, especially an elimination of harmful toxic additives in plastics. It is imperative that the plastic pollution issue is tackled at the very source by reducing fossil fuel extraction and rethinking our plastic production and consumption patterns. Plastic waste trade is a symptom of the global plastic production, a product that is inherently non-circular, rendering all downstream efforts to stop plastic pollution ineffective and enabling the vicious life cycle of plastics. So we urgently demand that our African governments individually and within the regional Bamako Convention firstly prevent plastic waste from being dumped into the region, protect the existing and new legislation that upholds our right to a safe, clean and healthy environment that is toxic-free, exercise their right to refuse shipments of plastic waste of all kinds, and modify the annexures of the Bamako Convention accordingly as it was called for in the decision CB 3 of 8. We also ask that they stringently enforce existing legislations like the Basel and the Bamako Conventions that restrict and at times prohibit waste import, but also undertake swift prosecutions and return to sender legal actions for illegal shipments. We call upon our governments to adopt national systems that allow waste pickers to be a part of all decision-making processes with the view of improving waste collection and management in Africa rather than importing waste. Last and finally, we ask that they engage in the ongoing discussions around a legally binding and game-changing global plastics treaty to ensure that it reflects the local plastic pollution realities within the region. Attempts have to be made to address the problems of plastic across its entire value chain, especially through the strict cap on the production of new plastic and to forbid the use of single-use plastic. Let us work together to stop waste colonialism, not only in Africa, but across the world. The African within must fight unceasingly against the appetites of foreign domination that currently presents itself as waste colonialism. The time to confront, weigh in, and discuss is now. So I would like to invite you all to please receive our full statement at the door on your way out, as well as a press release. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to questions now. I was going to talk about further developments, but I'm going to work those into our questions and go straight there. Is Please here? Yeah, she'll be handling the questions in the room and also that we get online. And
we don't have any questions from the people online, so I would like to
not yet.
open up. the
Okay.
floor. Yes.
So go ahead if you've got any questions or comments.
Why don't we collect 3 questions and then I'll open it up to the panelists.
Sounds good.
So first, second, and third. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. So just have a feeling like being in a trash bin after such a, intense amount of information. But I have actually a question to you, Jim, because you mentioned that you had access to bill of ladings. So obviously you've had access also to companies who were involved in this trade, is it right? And if you did have this access, did you speak publicly about that?
No, I don't have access to companies, but I do have access to extracted bills of lading. And there are companies that you're probably aware of, like Panjiva. That is a subscription based. It costs you a lot of money to get these extracts from the bills of lading that are collected by, for example, in the US, the Commerce Department. So it all comes from customs. It gets put in one big database, and then they're able to sell it. The Commerce Department has a deal with these companies like Panjiva to actually sell the data. And we get data from all over the world that way, but the US and Canadian data is most granular and detailed and timely. So we're thrilled to be able to get the US data, and it's so detailed that we can see who the exporter is. The only thing we can't see is who the importer is. But we can most usefully have the information available in our hands while the boat is still at sea. So then we can warn competent authorities. And that's what we've been doing. And we think this intelligence is like gold, especially from the US, where it's most likely to be illegal because it's a non-party. And most likely the waste is Y48, as I pointed out. So it will be illegal because it's controlled Basel waste. So it's really, great intelligence for any enforcement. So I hope that they start to realize that this is the gold that they need to really start prosecuting and inspecting and figuring out what's really going on with the border.
Thanks, Jim. Sorry, I'll just collect 2 questions, one shot, before I open it up to panelists to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this conduct this event. Actually, I have a question regarding your previous slide about Malaysia become the world champion plastic waste dumping ground for plastic waste shares code 3915. I just want to can you please explain the statement based on what data? Whether based on only on amount importation waste data or also based on the movement of the importation waste where it ends? Because in Malaysia, we have policy for waste import code 3915. Importation license is only given to the company if the imported waste is to be processed into another form such as leaf or resin. We not allow any importation to be direct disposed. It is Malaysia policy to ensure the importation of plastic waste is to produce a product, whether flakes or resin. So before the license is granted as well, we will conduct a factory inspection for housekeeping and processing machine in the factory to make sure it will be processed. So if you can.
Okay, sorry, hold on. Next question first.
Hi, thank you very much for the informative presentation. I think so many of the numbers put the statement that she says, which is, we feel like we're sitting in a trash can. My question is, so I have been working for the Cabinet of Ministers for the past couple of years. I've transitioned to the private sector now, but in the UAE, for instance, so many of the policies and regulations are difficult to implement because We have a federal government, and then every local authority or local city implements these policies, and it takes time. And so much of the challenges, or let's say problems, which are pointed out to the different countries that spoke today, have to do with problems. My question is, if we shift our lens to the private sector and their accountability in terms of providing, as Leslie said, sustainable financing to deal with the plastics that are in the border today or in the country today in terms of capacity building or investment in infrastructure. I'm just trying to reflect on all the sessions which I've attended for the past week, and I'd ask what the panel thinks in terms of an immediate solution for the plastic pollution that is putting impacts and health barriers for the generations to come. I mean, we can tell governments the problems that are happening because of poor regulation, implementation as much as we'd like, but really we do see over time that the private sector, if they act upon things, it tends to work out faster than waiting for governments to do so. So if we can, if you can provide a quick solution or what you think should be next step.
Okay, thank you, Faz. We are over time. Is it all right if we go on for 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Yes, and we have one more question at the end.
Well, let me take these first. I don't have that good a memory.
Malaysia data and then private sector.
Others may want to help us answer that last one. The first question from Malaysia is, how do we get these numbers? These numbers have nothing to do with the Malaysian government per se. They're what the exporter puts on the tariff code. When they're exporting something, they're asked, what is the HS code? They put that on the bill of lading, and we collected all the ones that were 3915. Okay, and they're coming from the US, and it doesn't matter whether they're going to a free trade zone or not. That's completely irrelevant, by the way, with Basel rules. It's still an import. So those numbers are pretty solid. Of course, people can mischaracterize things, but usually they mischaracterize things in a way that makes it look legal rather than illegal. In this case, we're seeing evidence of, because it's from the United States, this is likely illegal. But the big number of Malaysia is really actually recorded bills of lading on real shipments with actual volumes and container numbers and all of that. So I think it's a real good number for you to look at and realize that, yeah, Malaysia is getting the most waste at the moment. Hopefully that will change. Hopefully all these numbers will come down. So people on the panel can help me answer the other question. It sounded like you wanted to see the private sector involved in enforcing the Basel Convention. I'm not sure how we get that to happen. The private sector can absolutely help with not producing as much plastic waste. But once it's produced, I'm not sure how they could help enforce. And I think what has to probably happen is we have to have some people actually prosecuted. And it is a criminal act under the Basel Convention, any illegal trade, and yet so few people are prosecuted as criminals. This is a big part of the problem. When I was working on e-waste in the US, we don't even have the Basel Convention in the US. But I was able to use fraud law to go after exporters of e-waste because they lied to their governments saying they didn't do that. And the first time we were able to get some executives in jail, the whole scene changed. So 2 executives in my home city of Seattle, based on our GPS tracking, were found to be illegally exporting e-waste, and they lied to the government about that. So once we were able to put them in jail for 28 months each, that sent such a shockwave of information to the entire recycling industry. And they begin to say, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go to jail. We're going to start looking at what the rules really are. And does anybody have any other comments on the panel about the private sector involvement and what their role might be?
Yeah, I can comment a little bit. If you look at globally, the most widely recycled plastics are PET bottles, and especially in the US, it's HDPE. The reason why only these 2 packaging type or material type is recycled is relatively clean material. So that is why the recyclers want that material and make a pellet out of it and sell it. But in the last several years, if you look at the trend, even the packaging, those were all 3D containers in the past, now slowly moving into flexible packaging, for example, stand-up pouches. Previously, you might have got a peanut in a 3D box, which may be a PET bottle or a HDPE bottle or PP bottle, now it is turning into a flexible packaging standard pouches, which is very hard to recover, and not many communities in the US have a collection or acceptance to put it in their curbside recycling. And the machines used to recover the recyclables from the curbside bin, it contaminates the paper bits. So what I'm trying to say that is, see what this market have learned so far, meaning that the 3D containers, clean material, mono material, they are able to do good. Flexible, we don't know how to handle it. Even if you handle it, the heavy competition from the virgin plastics materials. That is denying or not allowing the recyclers to invest in recycling a plastics which has the least market in it. That is another big competition from the virgin plastics. So if I am a company, I will look at what is being recycled very widely all over. So I will focus on that rather than for the convenience reason and the argument of flexible packaging is less carbon intensive or emissions intensive. Don't do it if the market is not ready to recycle that. That is where I would focus.
Thank you. I'm gonna let the conversation flow
Yeah.
because we have one question online and one question here, but anyone feel free to stay behind or. So can I have a question from?
Thanks. My question is partly answered about your reflection now, but I think what's really interesting for me is to understand what are the root causes and the drivers for this trade, because you've said clearly that any trade to non-OECD countries is illegal right off the bat. It's illegal. So, well, if you had to kind of pinpoint the drivers in the US for this trade and some of the root causes for it, is it cowboys? Is it rogue traders? Is it states that just aren't managing their ways? And then similarly in the developing countries where it's destined for, what is driving it there? What are the root causes?
Yeah, good question, but I didn't mean to leave the impression that all exports to non-OECD are illegal. But they're certainly not. We're just talking about things that are controlled under Basel.
Yeah.
And usually the default procedure is prior informed consent, but we did look a lot about what was illegal. What is the driver? It's always economics, right? The waste is moving across the border because someone's going to make a buck. And the reason that happens is that you're externalizing real costs that we would have to pay if you kept it in the US, for example, or in France, for example. A lot of this stuff that moves is not valuable. So what happens when it arrives in Asia, they cherry pick it and dump the rest, but they don't have to pay the cost of that dumping or that burning, which is a real cost, not only to your health, but to mitigate or to ever clean up. Like in Guiyu, China, they've completely trashed their groundwater for centuries. What does it cost to clean up groundwater? What does it cost to bring back lives that have died of cancer? So those are the externalized hidden costs, which are never accounted for. And this is, once you send it overseas, who's going to present the exporter with the bill? You have damaged my territory. And it's very interesting to kind of reflect on why China did the ban of national sword. They finally did the ecological economics calculus of this, of the hidden costs, of the true costs. And they realized they didn't just do this to be magnanimous or whatever. They realized that economically they were losers. And it would be much better for them to take care of their own waste, do it right, and not bring in the cheap and dirty, which creates these externalities that nobody pays the bill for. So I hope that explains the drivers. Now, not all waste trade happens that way. I mean, there could be waste that moves to internalized costs. If it was going from, Myanmar to the United States because there was a better facility in the United States, they had nothing in Myanmar, that would be an example of internalizing costs and waste moving for that reason, but it's almost never happens. I mean, it may be 1% of the total trade is internalizing costs. So we're not totally against waste trade, but the lion's share of it is all about cheap and dirty, finding a place to get rid of it without paying the true cost.
Thanks, Jim. I have one final question from someone online, and I'll take yours, and that's it. Okay, so 2 questions, and now I'll open it up to the floor as well as to Yuyun online. So there's this online question from Miss Mira Subramaniam. Her question is, setting aside the concerns about the lack of enforcement, what gaps of information about the global plastics movement are important to fill, and what researchers, organizations are doing the best work to fill them? So what gaps of information are there about the global plastics movement, and who is doing the research to fill those gaps? And final question.
Yes, I'm from Slovenia. So few speakers were talking about misidentification of plastic waste, and I wonder which HS codes they were using, because that will maybe help also the countries of the export waste to enforce, to maybe to custom officers, be more precautious. Have that example.
So taking that first question about the gaps, right, in the data, and I'll just say a few words and open it up to the panel, but the Comtrade data is probably our best data source at the moment, except for what we can gather on the ground. The part about the Comtrade data that's very frustrating is you can't see the environmental fate. You can't know the importer and what the facility looks like. That's why we need you all on the ground to go and look at what's really going on there, and how are the costs being externalized, what's happening with the residues, etc. So that's frustrating to me. So we have been exploring with, like we did with e-waste, using GPS trackers, because that really follows the waste all the way, and then you can learn the environmental fate. So that's the future. And then also, I think reflecting on the second comment also is that we need much more better HS codes for sure, so that we can go beyond just identifying PVC, which is our only one we have, and that's all voluntarily listed. They can have very little penalties for misdeclaring things. But if we had HS codes that aligned with the Basel Convention, which is work that's underway, if you've seen that document in this meeting, that would really help. Then we would know what is Y48 for sure. Right now, all we can say is PVC is Y48. Yeah. So did I answer your question, or did
Yes, I generally, I also understand what's going on. I was just thinking that there may be some cases that you can provide us. For example, is it the HS code for paper or for some other waste?
Yeah.
So,
the HS codes are really not very detailed.
Maybe I can answer that question. So for Malaysia, we need import permits for plastic waste, HS 3915, but we don't need import permits for HS 3920. So that's another type of plastics. So they would write on their documents that they are importing 3920, but in reality it's 3915. But nobody would check because import permits are not needed. Does that answer your question?
yes, please, thank you.
If I may add, you're asking what other HS codes the criminals may use to bring in plastics.
Yeah.
So if we would have known that, we would have caught him, but that is most difficult. One example I could say is a few weeks ago, the Indian Customs received a tip. I don't know where it is from. So they asked it to open a particular container located in one of the port, which is a private port in Gujarat state in India. So it was declared, that container was declared as toiletries, but when they opened it, they saw red sandalwoods in it. So how could you imagine a guy who wanted to illegally ship red sandalwood would use a toiletry as in the declaration form? So that is, it's impossible for us to know what a HS code somebody could look. I just want to add one more thing. As Jim said, we were able to track all these things only because we know HS codes for plastics waste. What if somebody else does something else completely that we don't know? We don't know really how much of plastics being exported using other HS codes.
Just so we don't go until tomorrow, can I give everyone 1 minute to summarize?
Did you want to say something?
Yes, Yuyun first, and then everyone can just go take 1 minute each. Okay, Yuyun, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think identifying the gaps is will be a good job and good research if we if researchers get funded for this. And the problem is that not all information is available and accessible, and the manipulations of bill of ladings and the declaration, that's another tricky job, because it has to be accessible on the platform of reporting, and it's not easy to find out. So the best way is to have everyone declare honestly, of course, but it's challenging. And also prior informed consent have to be registered. And I don't know how far the process of prior informed consent will be able to be approved by one country with the knowledge or the acknowledgement from the Secretariat, for instance. Because, for instance, when Indonesia exported the confiscated containers that's suspected to be contaminated by hazardous waste, there is no knowledge how this will be processed, because it will be shipped to other countries anyway for exportation and for business, because there's an economic deal. Sorry, that's from my side. Thank you.
You can answer the slide one. Yeah, I'll just, my final comments, and I'll pass it down the road here, is that all the countries have to strictly enforce these amendments. It's not enough to just say we're gonna do the right thing, one COP. Next COP, we realized it's just a piece of paper. That's not acceptable. You have to enforce any law to make it work. This is especially true for the E7, as I call them, Japan, USA, EU, and also the receiving countries have to be more diligent. They really hold a lot of the cards as being the final place where things can be checked. We also are advocating for contamination threshold levels to be around 0.5%, which is what Hong Kong has. That will really help with making more things controllable. And these agreements that are bogus, Article 11 agreements that the EU has done and Canada and the US has done, have got to be reversed. I'm happy to say that there's an effort in the European Parliament to reverse the EU one, and I hope we can get the US and Canada to renounce their fake agreement as well. And finally, we have plastics flowing in hidden ways in RDF, refuse-derived fuel, paper and textiles, and that has to stop. So, your final words?
I'll make it short. We do not want any country to be a dumping ground, because we have seen once Malaysia was pushing back, the waste was going to other countries, and now US is sending waste to Mexico. So we do not want anyone to be a dumping ground. So the developed countries especially, you have the means to treat your waste or to also to prioritize source reduction, so that you don't have to send your waste to developing countries. So that is my wish.
Arm?
So I think the issue of waste trade is an issue of environmental injustice. I think you mentioned before that why is there economic incentive to import waste? People that we've talked to who work in waste collecting, they don't want to be doing this, but it's the easiest way to make money. And in recycling industries, there's a lot of money to be made. We've checked how much they can get from just one e-waste, one toxic hazardous waste. And you can't solve these problems unless you have more regulations. And when it comes to Basel, BRS, you just need more regulations. Whether that means Basel ban amendment, whether that means Wisconsin proposal, we need more regulations. And we hope that delegates will listen to this call and just be more stringent in controlling waste trade. Thank you.
Leslie.
Yeah, so
last word.
Yeah, just a short one to say that, I mean, obviously, if you look at the kind of waste trade that comes into Africa, the driving factor is economics, basically. And where you have economic issue driving the process, then you cannot take away the other issue of corruption in the process. So definitely that's an issue to be looked at. In addition to that, in Africa, the capacity is not there. at the at the ports, they can't understand a difference they don't understand the difference between one plastics and the other. If a regulator doesn't even, is unable to identify or differentiate between one plastic or how much more a custom officer who is not environmentally inclined or, do not understand the issue. So the issue of capacity for us to be able to efficiently walk the talk around Basel Convention, domestication, transposition, we must have to address the issue of resources that will enable implementers, especially the regulators, at least hone up their skills and capacity.
Very good. We're here to answer one-on-one any of your remaining questions. Thank you for being so patient with a long presentation. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope next time we give this type of presentation, we're going to have a lot more good news for you.